Hello and welcome. While Russia's May 9th parade was rather modest, Ukraine is gaining territory close to Bakhmut, which could be the precursor of a coming counteroffensive. At the same time, on the horizon, Ukraine has now some long-range cruise missiles that might be able to destroy the Kerch Bridge. This and more in the Situation Report. Over the last few days, there were further attacks, heavy attacks with cruise missiles and drones. The intensity, which is basically daily now, up to 40 drones or more, make the impression that Russia is trying to now brute force the usage of air defense systems and air defense missiles, which, as we all know, are rather limited and are in danger of running out. Should Russia achieve Ukraine to run out of air defense missiles, then it would be much harder for Ukrainian counteroffensive to succeed, and it would be much easier for the Russians to destroy Ukrainian troops that are attacking with its own air force that is more or less still intact as it was from the beginning of the war. Ukraine is striking back, though. We have a report here from opposition media, according to which 14 soldiers were injured. 14 Russian soldiers were injured in an attack on a training ground in Voronezh. The distance I saw was like 160 kilometers. That the attack was over a distance of 160 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. At the same time, Riba, the pro-Russia Telegram propaganda channel, was talking about more attacks in Moscow. Close to Moscow, a drone was shot down, and they say over 100 drones have been shot down or suppressed per day by this hour. So Ukraine is doing a massive air offensive that is very little reported deep into Russia, at least according to Riba. And if Riba is also talking that unfortunately several dozen drones were launched from the territory of the Russian Federation. This is highly interesting, as it would indicate a coordinated offensive, a coordinated operation that is using either agents within Russia or partisans, Russians that are intending to help the Ukrainian side, anything like this. Highly interesting there that it's the massive amount of drones is not coming from Ukraine, but from within Russia, which is obviously showing the effectiveness of the Ukrainian coordination in those attacks. At the same time, they are reporting that in Moscow, ordering a taxi was problematic at the airport because of GPS jamming. So the Russians apparently are jamming GPS over Moscow to make it harder for drones to hit an intended target. On the May 9th parade, Putin was the highest interesting part was that Putin was for the first time talking about a war, but he was talking about a war by the West against Russia. When it comes to the equipment that was used, it was really modest. The only tank that was used was a T-34 85. This was the only tank that has been used, apart from some missile carriers and things like this. So the whole vehicle used in the Moscow parade was slow, and it obviously invited a lot of mockery worldwide. The interesting part, though, is that it was only one T-34. Usually it's more. That could be an indication that every repair work, every maintenance shop is completely used up to work for the Ukraine war. But on the other hand, just one tank is kind of probably, from aesthetic standpoint, if you don't intend a huge parade with tanks, then just one as a historic reference makes probably more sense. The ridiculing would have probably been stronger if the only tanks that had driven there would have been 10 or 15 T-34s. That this was not everything, while it indicates that Russia is probably needing its tanks more closer to the front line, that doesn't mean they have run out of tanks, which a quick look at other parades is showing. We see here Khabarovsk. Let me quickly mute this. We see Khabarovsk here in eastern Russia. We see a T-34 in front of a Joseph Stalin. That should be some SU self-propelled gun here. We see several launchers, but several Katyushas. But what's interesting here too is we see T-62Ms So we see main battle tanks, not modern ones, but modernized ones. Those should be the ones with the, and we see a number of those. Those should be the ones with thermal vision that have been modernized, which shows that tanks are available. And there's a longer thread that shows like, here we see BMP-2s, we see, what is that, T-72? I'm not completely sure. There, I'm far from being an expert, but we see that the armored equipment, those are anti-tank, self-propelled, if you want it this way, the anti-tank guided missiles on a MTLB. Khabarovsk, we have already seen. We see the pictures here, and apparently there have been T-72. Yeah, those should be T-72B3s. Have also been there. We see Kaliningrad. We see armored vehicles. We see it in other locations as well. Kaliningrad, Rostov, we see modern tanks here. So if Russia had really intended to show us a parade with 30 to 40 to 50 tanks, these pictures alone show that not every single tank is on the front line. Now, obviously, you can say they are probably taken from nearby training grounds where they are needed, and shipping them to Moscow is not economically reasonably, especially when you think about potential training that is falling short then. But it also shows that the T-34 was not the only tank that Russia had available for a parade. So it should be, while it is an indication of the urgency of need for MBTs inside of Russia, it's not the indication that this is actually the only MBT that was available, as can be seen in this thread very easily. And we have a video from the Pentagon. Let me see, where is it? Okay, I'm sorry, but apparently I somehow, unfortunately, made a mistake here. So apparently, I'm sorry, but the Ministry of Defense of the United States said in a press interview, confirmed that the Kinzhal so-called hypersonic weapon was in fact intercepted from a Patriot missile. Now, obviously, you can call this propaganda that the US military wants to hype its own weapon and claim that the Russians are of no use whatsoever, but at least they confirm it. And as said, there is some doubt how much the Kinzhal can be called a hypersonic weapon, because the indication is not just the speed, but the maneuverability, and whether it can keep up that maneuverability until Mach 5. Nevertheless, the US confirms that the Kinzhal was actually shot down. I cannot tell you more than this. Propaganda is obviously still possible, but I have no confirmation, no clear indication that this should not be true generally, even though there are some doubts with the fragments from the Kinzhal that have been found on the ground, but they might have just been moved. So official saying from both the Ukrainians as well as from the Americans is the Kinzhal has been downed by a Patriot missile. When we come to the developments along the front line, north of the Seversky Donetsk, we have Russian offensive actions here at Snikivka, and further north at Mazyu-Tivka. We have some reports of Russian attacks here. They have led to nothing, though. Further south, we have attacks at Makivka that also have been repulsed. The Ukrainians are saying some attacks were in the direction of Nevsky, and the Russians themselves say they defeated several sabotage groups. So we have confirmation from the Russian side again that the Ukrainians do some offensive action. Whether that's actually intended for sabotage or for recon, we don't know. But we see, and we will continue to see this throughout the situation report, that the Ukrainian side is slowly switching to the offensive. Probably right now it's more of like feeling the front line, it's reconnaissance in force at times. So this is not the outbreak of a full counteroffensive yet, but the Ukrainians are definitely trying to feel where this would make sense. South of the Seversky Donetsk, fighting is continuing for Bilohorivka and for Spirne. No confirmed changes here from my side. Orehovo, Vasilivka, heavy fighting there. No confirmation that it achieved anything. Attacks close to Bodanivka are also continuing, and the Russians have extended their control over the trench system that is in this area, so they gained a few more meters nothing in total that changes anything about the situation here, but they gained some ground. The road through Khomove should be closed anyways by now. The Russian military bloggers were also saying the Russians were trying to break through into Khomove, but they were defeated. So Khomove itself and probably the high ground above it should still be in Ukrainian hands as of now, which is obviously important because from that high ground, the whole valley can be looked at and could be taken under direct fire control, which would endanger the supply lines into the rest of Bakhmut that is still under Ukrainian control. In Bakhmut itself, we have some confirmed successes by the Russians. This video has been shown around for a while. You might have seen it yourself already. This is Ukrainians giving fire support by shooting at the second floor here, or third floor probably, on this house next to them. You see a shoulder-fired, probably anti-tank missile, even though I couldn't see the detonation. And there you see own troops retreating from there. It's expected, or the thinking is that on the higher floors, the Russians were already, and that the Ukrainians were withdrawn. And this is geolocalized, and it was this building here, so directly north of the so-called Citadel, which seems to be still under Ukrainian control. And it's called the Citadel because here a lot of high rises are available. What is reported, though, is that the Russians have started there to go through the side walls. As you can see, the windows are only in two directions along the building, and the Russians have now taken over that good old tactics of breaking through the walls of the house to avoid going through windows and through doors. And it seems that Ukrainians are somewhat surprised by it, despite it being fairly old tactics. But yeah, this is the reporting that this is a reason why they are currently successful, because if the Ukrainians haven't prepared defensive positions on those front-facing walls, on the front and rear end of those apartment blocks, then they obviously can't see anything. And if the Russian attackers use it to hide from Ukrainian eyes, then they can approach the buildings fairly unimpeded. While the Russians are slowly advancing in Bakhmut, the citadel itself is more or less still holding. There's still a connection towards Khomove, but the Russians are gaining ground there. But there was some change close to Ivanivske and Stupovki. First, there were Russian attacks reported, and now we have the report that the Ukrainian side did a counterattack and took that whole area here, retook it in a counterattack. You have videos are spread around that shows Russians actually running away, and that's in concert to what Prigozhin said. Prigozhin was complaining that Russians were fleeing, Russian soldiers were fleeing from a position that cost them 500 men, that cost Wagner 500 men to capture, and the Russians have given it up and allowed the Ukrainians to break in there. That should be in this position, and the videos in fact show the Russians running away, even though reports are that 20% of the fighters were Wagner's itself. We also have some pictures of prisoners of war, and in the videos obviously you see Russian corpses too, so the running was not, they haven't given up without any attempt to fight, or at least that's what's to be expected. Interesting, though, that the Russian military bloggers are fairly quiet about this. It seems to be that there might be some kind of directive coming from Moscow to prevent a spread of panic by suppressing messages like this. Generally, though, about Bakhmut, Ukraine is saying they can't see any lack of grenades. So it seems that Wagner's complaints about the lack of grenades is not really showing that much to the Ukrainian side. They actually said the artillery fire has increased over the last few days. Right now, further south, we have fighting for Avdiivka is also continuing, fighting west of Bakhmutivka, attacks on Avdiivka itself from Kardianka. Further south, we also have attacks in the direction of Pervomaiske up here. There are reports of Ukrainian attacks, counterattacks being successful in the direction of Vodiane. I was not able to confirm it, though. but Ukrainian offensive is taking place, offensive activity is taking place there as well. At Marinka, Russian attacks are continuing, but no confirmation of anything having achieved there. And the Ukrainians had a small territorial gain here at Novodonetsk in a counterattack, and the Russians are saying there are reconnaissance in force in Western Donetsk, so probably somewhere in this region, another sign of the Ukrainian side offensive activity by the Ukrainian side. Generally, in the southern area, nothing much has changed. Some reports about Ukrainian small attacks with small units. The Russians usually call them sabotage units. Reconnaissance in force is also happening here, and there are reports that the sites, the shores of the Dnipro are being heavily mined by the Russians. So the Russians take it seriously that there's the possibility of a Ukrainian invasion or a Ukrainian river crossing into southern Kherson. Generally, Prigozhin has said again that he only received 10% of the promised artillery shells, even after he had been promised that he's now going to receive everything he needs. But he says he's not going to retreat. He's going to continue fighting because the Russian Ministry of Defense has threatened Wagner with treason should they retreat. Obviously, what else would it be if you're on the front line and run away and allow the enemy to capture a lot of things? So I guess Wagner, Prigozhin is a little afraid of the consequences of doing what he actually threatened. And generally, Prigozhin is also saying he can neither reach Gerasimov nor Surovikin, even though Surovikin is considered to be an intimate or close with Wagner. And supposedly Surovikin was set up as an intermediary between the Ministry of Defense and Wagner. And now Prigozhin is saying he can't even reach him. So not good signs for Wagner here. Generally, along the whole front line, we see small Ukrainian attacks. That's not the full force of a counteroffensive, but it shows us that the Ukrainians are probably preparing for the offensive. They're feeling where in the front line they can advance. They are making small gains at some point, but nothing of any consequence, nothing serious, but it's mostly reconnaissance when we have to judge it as of now. When it comes to the political sphere, we have an interesting thing that the representative of the Transnistrian separatists, which is Transnistria is that breakaway region of Moldova where Russian soldiers are stationed. He's now asking for reinforcements from Russia. And as obviously Russia can't send soldiers there, he's suggesting that Russians living in Transnistria should be recruited into the Russian peacekeeping force that is defending Transnistria for the Russian interests there. Also, we have reports from Ukraine that aid group that is Ukraine DAO supposedly is now highly under fire. For instance, the head of it is getting a salary of $5,000 monthly, while Zelensky's salary supposedly is only $1,100. So there are articles, and you can see it here. You can easily find it should you be interested in this. I cannot confirm how much of this is true, but again, it would be an example of problems with the war in Ukraine that obviously some people use that to line their pockets while claiming to do something for the war effort. We've had arrests inside of Ukraine for that as well. Even within the military establishment, there are obviously some people taking the chance to line their pockets in that hour of need. That shouldn't surprise us too much. But in case you're interested, or in case you have met or even donated to Ukraine DAO before, you can Google it and you'll surely find the article from the Kiev Post. Other than that, we have a picture of who was next to Putin on the May 9th parade when he sat down with the veterans. And on his right hand is Yuri Dvoykin, who suppressed the anti-Soviet underground in Ukraine, according to Nexta, which is an opposition media from Belarus. And on his left hand is a KGB veteran who took part in the suppression of the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia, so maybe sending some signs in this regard as well to whom he's sitting next to. When it comes to international aid, there is a report from Brazil that Ukraine tries to buy 450 Guarani ambulance. Those are armored vehicles. As you can see, 6x6 ambulances are the reports. Whether they are going to retrofit them into APCs is unclear, and whether they are going to receive them, but they want to order 450. I think they probably have a use for 450 armored ambulances as well. And while Brazil is not supporting Ukraine in the war, it might be willing to send some defensive equipment, as it could be called, ambulances into Ukraine, especially if they are paid for with hard cash from Ukraine's supporters. Also, we have images now of Sukhoi 25 from the Ukrainians with Sunni missiles. You can see them here. Those are the American supplied unguided missiles. I think there are some versions that have laser designator as well, but generally they are unguided missiles, making up more or less for the shortage that it should be there by now of unguided S-8, which Ukraine used so far, and they have a bigger range too, so Ukraine's Air Force can use them from a little longer distance away from the front line if they want to use them for their usual ballistic throwing over the front line into Russian positions. Also, we have reports that the British are now thinking about delivering Storm Shadow. It's always said they are 300 kilometers. I cannot really confirm that because the Storm Shadow has a warhead of 450 kilograms, which is also specifically against concrete buildings. So it should be usable against the pillars of the Kerch Bridge. But when it comes to the range, the data I find is 560 kilometers. But there's an export variant for non-NATO members, and it's the Black Shaheen version, and it has a range of 250 kilometers. So it's possible that this might not be the 300 kilometer version, but that 300 is a false number, that it might actually just be 250 kilometers. And this is air-launched, a stealth missile that flies low over the ground, 30 to 40 meters. It even has sensors to confirm targets right before hitting them and change targets to a position where there's already some damage that has occurred or something. So it's a really high-end, powerful missile. And there are reports that in Poland in December 2022 there were tests to employ them from Sukhoi 24 to allow for to see if they can actually be used. So far we have not confirmation that they have actually been delivered to Ukraine, or that they work from the Sukhoi 24, or that Great Britain has committed to delivering them, but they seem to be looking into this in serious by now, and that might obviously give the Ukrainians the means to destroy the Kerch Bridge if need be. And finally, we have an image for the May 9th parade in Uralsk in Kazakhstan. Here is a statue of the Field Marshal Shukov, and as you can see, there are some things to thank him, and a toilet bowl was put there as well. I'm pretty sure you'll get the reference. If you enjoyed this, please hit the thumbs up button. Let me know in the comments what you think about the coming Ukrainian offensive. Also, those comments are obviously really good for the algorithm. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting the channel. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back. An dieser Stelle auch noch mein herzliches Dankeschön an all jene, die den Kanal Monat für Monat beständig unterstützen.